Now? Okay, so thank you for agreeing to this. I really appreciate you taking the time. I do love your site and love your work, and certainly love your take on things.
Well, I
So
appreciate that. My pleasure.
you're most welcome. Anyways, I sort of do my own little thing in the area of the risk of nuclear war and every other topics related to that. And
Sure.
we seem to be very much on the same page there. But first, I want to start off by, can you tell me a little bit about what inspired you to launch your site and your thoughts around that?
Well, I think the biggest thing for me is just the historical record. I think if we go back in history and we look at other events that have occurred around the world in the past, specifically say World War I, the Civil War, even World War II. There's not a great deal of insight or conversations that occurred as things happen. Does that make sense?
Oh, totally. I mean,
Yeah.
I look at past too of same things. I mean, I look at how everything that led up to World War One and how we stumbled into that one, and even farther back to the collapse of the Western Roman Empire.
Sure. And I often wondered if we could go back and if there was a YouTube channel or some sort of social media channel that existed where maybe the Confederacy could talk about the onset of what was happening and why it was happening. I think we'd have a better picture of the rationale and the why.
Hmm. Absolutely. Okay, cool. So I'm really glad you have done your channel, and I've been watching your stuff now for a while. In fact, I've actually, you're now on my, basically, featured channels link. I got a link to you along with, other interesting folks, such as Ivan's, Stepanov, the guy who did the nuclear war simulator, which I've used to simulate the escalate to de-escalate fallacy. Probably the
Right.
politest word I can think of to describe that piece of insanity, but there it is.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's move on to that topic. What's your take on what's happening in Ukraine relative to the increased risk of nuclear war and how you see it playing out?
Well, I mean, it's only going to end two ways, right?
Yeah.
There's either going to be some sort of détente,
Hmm.
and the Russians are going to get most of or some of what they're asking for or looking to get.
Hmm.
And I mean, outside of that, what is the what options do the Ukrainians have in the
Hmm.
long run?
Right.
And there's not a lot other than in seeking the direct participation of NATO
And
in the
that would be the end
conflict,
of us
which
all.
already is happening.
Yeah.
I think if you go back and you look at history, you look at and I've talked about this before, the say the Cuban Missile Crisis
Right.
or any event or any time period during the Cold War, and I think you and myself both existed in that time period.
Exactly.
There was never a period of violence like we're seeing now.
Well, absolutely. And the rhetoric and the
Yeah,
lack of leadership, I mean, true leadership,
yeah, yeah.
especially on the Western side. I mean, yeah, I think the Russians have leadership. I think Putin is a moderate, and God help us all if Medvedev ever got in charge of it. But on our side, man, it's just scary.
Yeah, if you go back to the 1980s, do you remember the miniseries? I don't think it was a miniseries. I think it was just a movie that came out on one of the major networks at the time. It was in the early 80s. It was The Day After.
It was a mini series. I think it was a couple of episodes together. I think it was one
Yeah,
long episode, stuff like that. Yeah,
yeah.
I saw that, but I think even scarier was the British movie Threads.
Have not seen that yet.
You should see that. It's probably the most realistic impression of the aftermath of the nuclear war. I always thought that the day after kind of sanitized the whole thing as far as the aftermath of it. Threads shows, I mean, really what we can expect, I think, in many ways. It's on YouTube, so it's worth the taking an hour and a half to watch it because it's probably the most realistic aftermath of nuclear war that I've ever seen as far as how I perceive it happening.
Yeah, and what's even more disconcerting is with the special effects, the CGI,
Yeah,
the quality of programming that exists now,
yeah,
they have not replicated the day after.
yeah. Or threads, yeah.
Everything right now is based on climate change and these far fetched notions that the Earth is going to end via climate change. But the reality is, the most likely way the Earth is going to end is with humans getting into a nuclear exchange.
Well, yeah, I mean, I did a short video on the subject. I think climate change is basically slow enough that we can adapt, and it's certainly not going to end the Earth. I mean, it's just going to make life miserable for the people around the equator, but certainly not going to end the Earth. But a full-on nuclear war will just totally uh, destroy the northern hemisphere. You're looking at maybe 360 million dead, according to the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists, in the first few weeks, and a couple of billion at least over the course of a year or so due to nuclear winter and the destruction of the supply chains and agricultural lands. Because it seems both well, America especially, it was insane enough to put their missile sites in prime agricultural land, not in some desert down in Death Valley where it really would have been a better place to put them. But there it is. And the Russians much the same. Only the Chinese are smart enough to stick theirs in a desert. Yeah, I mean, nuclear war will have instantaneous climate change. Literally. So yeah.
Yeah, and then you have the Ukrainians or whatever capability is going after the Russian early warning radars
That
designed to.
scares me. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, continue. Sorry, I've interrupted you.
Yeah, so again, just not a good place. And again, you go back in history, you go back to the starting in the 1960s and work your way into the towards the end of the Cold War,
Hmm.
and we have never at any point in time been in the place that we currently are right now.
Hmm.
And if we had been and would have been, it would be receiving much more factual media attention,
Right.
which it isn't.
Right. Yeah, we've never been in this situation. Well, as far as having nuclear weapons in this situation, we've been in this situation in the past. I mean, this feels a lot like my reading of the months leading up to World War One. If they had nuclear weapons, Europe would have been cremated. But I mean, there it is. Yeah, it scares me, and the level of poor leadership in the West and the arrogance and dare I say, very 1984-esque doublethink. People are supposed to think that Putin's a madman, but also supposed to think that he's bluffing and will back down. So I guess what they think he's a cowardly madman. I don't know, but and they say, well, he hasn't done anything yet when we crossed the red lines. And so I point out, I did a video on the subject looking at the red lines in World War II. Hitler kept on crossing the West's red lines, the Western Alliance's red lines, and they did nothing. Chamberlain did nothing about the occupation of the Rhineland, the remilitarization of Germany, taking the Sudetenland and Czechoslovakia. But then when and they did nothing, and Hitler figured, oh, I can do whatever I want. So I'm going to go into Poland now. And also, bang, the West declared war on him, and he found himself in at war with France and the British Empire. Again, it will be the same thing. I mean, eventually we'll go one red line too far and bang, and then it's all hell will break loose.
Yeah, and you're really getting a false narrative in terms of the why, right? So
Yeah.
the big why in terms of why the United States is directly supporting the Ukrainians. It's as you say, this fallacy that if the Russians take control, let's say hypothetically, of all of the Ukraine,
Yeah.
they just take the whole thing, right?
Yeah.
Well, according to the West and the misinformation that's being regurgitated, is that the next place that the Russians are going to attack is going to be Poland, right?
Right.
But they don't have the capability to do that.
Precisely.
The capability to go to war against Poland, and then yes, you would be in a war against the North Atlantic Treaty Organization at that point,
Right.
if that were to occur, and the Russians know that.
Hmm.
But that is not what the Ukraine is.
No.
And I would argue that it was an incredibly strategic mistake to onboard Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia as well. I just don't think it's tenable. I don't think it's, if you look at, okay, we're going to accept these Baltic states into the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, how are you going to defend it?
Right.
And it
Yes.
becomes Poland is defendable.
Right.
The Baltic states are not defendable.
Well, absolutely not. I mean, they're kind of very much isolated. Their militaries are fairly small. It'd just be a speed bump. It'd be over before it started. About the only NATO forces I'm aware of there, I know Canada, because I'm Canadian, has a battalion combat group there. But other than that, you know, and I think Finland made a big mistake breaking their neutrality and joining up. Uh, joining NATO, because their neutrality had always been respected throughout the Cold War, or, ever since they gave Stalin the bloody nose, back in the day.
Yeah,
Uh,
during the Winter War. Yeah,
yeah, and the continuation war too. That's why
right,
it was the only country that was on German ally that was not occupied by the Soviet Union.
right. Yeah, and that was part of that agreement where essentially
Hmm.
the Finns would stay neutral. They actually purchased Soviet equipment. They had for a time they had BMP-1s in their force construct,
Yeah.
and I don't think these states are looking at the cost versus the benefit.
Well, precisely. And the scary thing is that's that World War I started because of all these interlocking alliances and getting back to Russians. That's one thing about all that annoyed me about all the nuclear war films that were made back in the 70s and 80s is so one morning Russia decides to attack somebody. Soviet Union, hey, Boris, yes, Ivan, let's go attack the West tomorrow morning. Okay, I'll tell the boys, they'll be ready. Yeah. uh, I mean, they never wanted to. I mean, it's bizarre. You get even more bizarre when you look at China. If you look at the history of China, they never had a history of imperialism. They were able to build ocean-going ships, but they never went and settled Hawaii or the west coast of North America. They just stayed where they were. Anyways, but there, that's a. But yeah,
Sure.
and
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
also, people don't understand the constant, what happened. I mean, you had this manufactured revolution when Newland and Company set off in 2014, and then they started, you know, suppressing and oppressing the Russian speakers, in the Donbass and Lugansk areas and whatnot, and they started just going after them. Rather than cutting a deal, they had a chance with Minsk too. To have a similar situation we have here in Canada, where Quebec is pretty well has a fair bit of degree of autonomy as far as language and culture and stuff like that, and it's worked for quite well, as it does in Belgium and in Switzerland. But no, they decided to go and crush the Russian speakers, and become part of NATO, and there it is. Nobody understands context.
No, no, or ramifications.
Well, yeah, the horrible ramifications. I mean,
Yeah.
hello, are you guys nuts? Yeah, it's just it frightens me. Anyways,
Yeah,
um,
and we're dealing with really a false sense of security.
mhm,
When I have the opportunity to talk to colleagues and or what I call the uninformed urbanite. I've
Yeah,
talked about this on my program quite a bit.
yeah, I love that term.
These conversations that come up regarding the possibility of war with Russia, and it's almost like they don't understand that Russia possesses nuclear weapons, and when they acknowledge the fact that Russia does have nuclear weapons, they seem to have this idea that the U.S. has this capability to interdict inbound nuclear weapon systems, and we have a very limited capability,
Yeah.
but not one that is going to protect the continental United States and Canada.
Well, yeah. Well, I actually both did a video on the subject called "Are You Feeling Lucky," as well as an article which is on the blog for the American Civil Defense Association website, which I talked first of all, that the two myths: one, that the Russian nukes won't work. Yes, they will work, and they actually are. That they put a lot of money in modernizing their force, and two, that whole concept. And I said, well, those 44 interceptors were only designed to intercept very primitive ICBMs like what North Korea has, which have not the advanced stuff that the Russia has with the advanced penetration aids and other decoys and all the other stuff. And even with against the more primitive stuff, they only had a 52% kill rate on the tests. So, I don't even think it'll do well against the current generation North Korean missiles, much less something like the Sarmat or the Ares.
No, the release of all the nuclear weapons on just one Russian boomer
Yeah.
that, let's hypothetically say, results in 60 to 70% of those nuclear weapons hitting their targets, and that includes the multiple reentry vehicles and what
Yeah.
have you. It would collapse our civilization.
Well, it would. I mean, it would. I mean, it wouldn't even take that much. I think basically just the MIRVs on one Sarmat would probably, judicially placed could do that.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, think of how FEMA handled Hurricane Katrina or other disasters. What do you think if you exploded, say, a half a dozen 800 kiloton nuclear weapons on key targets in the eastern seaboard of the United States? What will that do?
Yeah, have you had the opportunity to read a Nuclear War yet?
Which one?
It's a book. The author, it's a female.
Oh,
It's it,
her book,
yeah,
Jacobson. Well, I like what she talks. I have a love hate relationship with that book. I love what the whole aftermath stuff she does and the strike and stuff like that. But I disagree with her scenario. I wish she had picked a more realistic scenario to start off.
sure.
I don't see the North Korean Kim. He wants to stay in power. He wants to live. His nukes are just to make sure he doesn't get regime changed the way Saddam Hussein and Muammar Gaddafi does. He's not going to just launch a nuclear strike on the West knowing it's going to, because he knows full well what will happen. I would have preferred if she picked a Ukrainian escalation scenario or China versus U.S. Taiwan escalation scenario because it kind of ruined that bit for me. But everything else is, yeah, was spot on.
Right. Sure. Yeah, the way it goes in and delves into the aftermath,
Yeah,
and again, I asked the question is, why don't we see a major Hollywood production talking about this? It's non-existent.
that's because the establishment wants to keep the populace in a nice numb state and distracted by silly things like Taylor Swift concerts or the inquest on those bunch of billionaires that died in that piece of carbon fiber going after looking at the Titanic thing,
Right.
the old
Right.
Titan thing. I mean, rather than just distract us on all these other stuff like that. And all the fun and games in the election, basically all get distracted by wedge issues that do not impact the military-industrial complex, and thinking we actually have a choice if you vote for uniparty, A or uniparty B. There it is.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, they want to just keep us distracted. They don't want to scare the people. So the only so they make a silly thing out of a video game. They have this Fallout thing, but that's nothing. It's not real. It's it's all kind of the video game stuff. It's not. Yeah, there it is.
Yeah,
There's just a few of us out here just trying to voices in the wilderness, so to speak.
yeah, bread and games. But again, if you go back to the '80s, and if what is happening was happening then,
Hmm.
I think the coverage would probably look a little different. And I don't know. I don't know what's happened
Hmm.
with our media is just gone. It no longer reports.
Yeah. Hmm. Hmm.
How long have you had your channel up now?
A couple of years. Um,
Yeah.
but it's been very slow slog. I, haven't really been able to get a lot of traction so far.
Yeah, you just keep going
Yeah.
and try to do something every day.
Yeah, I do. Yeah,
And
I do. And I mean, I'm still, I'm, at least I have a small following. There are some people out there who are worried and are concerned and are interested in finding out, what's really happening out there. And I do my research. I'll put links in the comment in the description, for stuff that's, I think is pertinent and germane to support my point of view in that sense. And yeah, I've made it a bit. I've done a lot of self study. I've got quite an extensive library of material on nuclear war.
yeah, the background for my channel, and I just got to do a quick shout out to the Tigrayan community.
Hmm.
My channel really got a little bit more traction when I started talking about what was happening in the former state of Ethiopia,
Mm.
and I was doing coverage on that war, the war between Abiy Ahmed and the Tigrayan Defense Forces,
Right.
and that's ultimately what started drawing attention to my channel.
Hmm. Yeah, cool. I know I've been sort of picking up a more traction since I've started focusing more on the risks of it, and pointing out the U.S. and NATO's role in stoking that risk. So, so as I sort of pivoted more of a survival oriented, though. Although I do have my survival playlist for more expedient things. So there it is, based on of course, a lot of the information from the nuclear war survival manual, the green one. Uh, Nuclear war survival skills. This guy's work. So, so okay, moving on a bit. So, any other flashpoints that concern you? I mean, you think you thought about possibly what could possibly happen related to China, Taiwan.
Well, I don't believe that. I think the only capability that exists right now for the Chinese is a an embargo
Hmm.
on, on the island of Taiwan. I don't
Yeah.
think they have the amphibious capability
Yep.
to mount a successful amphibious operation to take the island.
I agree. Yeah.
Yeah, and it appears that if there is a military decision to be made, that is what Xi wants: a
Hmm.
very quick, very robust operation that takes the island.
Hmm.
And I think he's getting pushback from his military command, saying, "Look, we just don't have that capability." And furthermore, the biggest challenge for the Chinese is going to be the American subsurface fleet,
Well, absolutely. Yeah.
and that is what would really prevent a successful amphibious operation against Taiwan. So again, the only operation that the Chinese could undertake would be a a blockade.
Right.
And how long would that take? Would it even be successful?
Hmm.
That's a big unknown.
Right. And
But
you also, yeah.
but to attack that island, which is probably going to have more in terms of force density than what was seen during Operation Overlord and the D-Day landings,
Right.
you really have to know what you're doing. And unfortunately for the Chinese, they've just not been in that space to launch amphibious operations. I mean, we had the opportunity to conduct the island hopping campaigns in
Hmm.
the Pacific, so we kind of understood the operational art in which in what you needed in terms of capability to take
Hmm.
a large, very well defended island.
Right.
And the Chinese don't have any experience in that realm right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And you also have other allies, like if you're talking about subsurface, the Japanese have some of the most advanced air independent propulsion stealth subs anybody has. Even better than the Swedish Gotlands. So you got those in that mix too. But yeah, I mean, the Western powers had that knowledge and plenty of experience in the Western theater too. Everything from Torch to Sicily landings, the beta. I like to call it almost the proof of concept beta test, which was the Dieppe raid with the Canadian forces, and we learned a lot of hard lessons on that one that made D-Day a little more successful and so forth. Um, yeah. So I guess pivoting around to leadership, what's your thoughts on the current leadership? Out there. Any comments you'd like to make about that?
Of the United States.
Well, the United States, everybody.
Oh, it's horrendous.
Yeah.
It's horrendous. I mean, there's no other word for it. It's probably the worst. No, it's not probably. It is the worst leadership that the world has ever seen from the United States. Look, realistically, we don't even know who is running the country right now. We
True.
don't. We have no idea.
No, I have my
None.
guesses, but we have no idea. Yeah.
Not a clue.
Yeah.
And it just kind of reinforces the whole concept of the deep state, because the only alternative right now for what's running the country is, in fact, the deep state.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. It does. That there's always been a shadow government.
Yeah, yeah. It's again just tied to what's happening right now. With, I mean, if you were to go back in history and you were to go back to the Bay of Pigs
Yep.
and you were to transplant the leadership that existed then with the leadership that exists now,
Yeah.
there probably wouldn't be a civilization.
Right. Yeah, I certainly I know for a fact I would have been guaranteed killed in the first few minutes of that war because I was born and raised in North Bay, Ontario, which at the time was the NORAD Northern Command bunker to the south of me, the Beaumont surface to air missile base to the west of me, and the Canadian Air Force interceptor base to the north west of me, and me in the middle. That would have been pretty quick. But
Yeah, I mean, me too. I'm in a not guy. I've got Cheyenne Mountain to my south, and I've got Buckley
yeah,
to
yeah.
my northeast. So
Hmm.
it's precarious.
Oh, yeah, indeed. So, anything you want to say to the people, the citizens of our countries and of the West? Any comments you want to take about the uninformed citizenry?
Well, until that changes, and I don't see that happening,
Hmm.
it's really kind of irrelevant. It
Yeah.
it really doesn't matter. I mean, just the amount of the amount of ignorance that exists, and then you have to look at just the. I mean, you look at the old Democrat who I would say the vast majority have been ideologically captured,
Yeah.
and they're going to go along with whatever their team is saying or doing, no
Hmm.
matter what that is, no
Hmm.
matter if that leads to an outcome that is going to remove the whole concept of I've talked about this before, of toilet paper and running water and perpetual radiation sickness. I mean, it's insane.
Oh yeah. It is. That's why yeah, I do recommend the film Threads to anyone who wants
Threads.
to see.
I'll
Yeah, to see what there's probably the most realistic portrayal of the aftermath of what it will be like. Uh,
and that takes place in the United Kingdom.
yeah,
Yeah. Okay.
and it's done almost kind of like a documentary style. Every now and then it shows the events leading up. I think it's some, starts, with tensions in the Mideast, and then starts talking about every now and then it'll blurb that, and so many megatons of nuclear weapons have hit, England in this time frame, and da da da, and it just talks about that, and it follows various people. So it's a docudrama, and very well done. For the time, and of course they had no special effects, but it's just very disturbing film. But it's actually very realistic. The other ones, of course, I like is the animation of As the Wind Blows. That was a good one, and as the last events leading up to the strike itself, there was actually a project done by some students in Toronto, called The Last Broadcast, which was also good too.
Yeah, and the reality is if that happens, you're not going to get any information.
No,
Uh, the infrastructure that provides you this rapid knowledge that we have now, i.e., the internet, broadband, what have you, all that goes away instantaneously. You won't know anything. You won't have power.
yeah.
You won't know what's happening.
Well, yeah. In fact, well, even before they won't even tell us. I totally agree with Annie Jacobson, that the fact they want that kind. First, you'll find out about somebody uploading a Instagram video or something like that, or a TikTok video for a nuclear explosion someplace, or basically, I always look at everything goes dead from the EMP. That's your first warning that we're in deep doo doo. But you think of how they handled the Maui fire. That's just it. Nobody got any warning. People
Right.
died because they weren't warned. These guys are going to dither and dither and dither. They're going to be very concerned about getting their own sorry asses to some bunker somewhere.
Yeah, and again, you wouldn't even. I don't even think you would have that kind of warning. I don't know if you would have the benefit of seeing a nuclear detonation on the internet
Yeah,
to you have the concept of what is actually happening. You wouldn't know.
yeah,
You would lose power
yeah,
depending on where you're at.
yeah,
You may or may not
yeah,
hear the nuclear detonation.
yeah,
If you're not near it, you probably at a certain point would start to smell it. You would see the ash and what have you.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I would say right now I live in Vancouver, which is a counter value target, the port, second largest port on the Pacific coast. On Vancouver Island is probably a first primary target, counterforce target, the Canadian Pacific Fleet Naval Base, because they want to take out all our frigates to, so we can't go hunting their boomers. So that'll probably get nailed first, and I would probably see that flash. And that would give me a few minutes to find. I got a few places I'm going to hunker down, a little very deep parkades, But or just the fact that all of a sudden all the power goes out from the EMP strike. And I know I have only a few minutes. There it is. But it's going to be scary. It's going to be horrible. Like I said, it's going to be like Threads, and I just pray it doesn't happen. I don't want my. I've got grandkids. I value their lives.
Yeah. I mean, unfortunately, we've never not used a weapon in our possession. And
Yeah,
when you have one side that has such military dominance
yeah.
and what is the last option for that other side that may not have that type of military dominance? What's the nuclear option?
Well, yeah, because it is if we lose, everybody loses. The old Samson doctrine, so to speak. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Just incredibly disconcerting time
yeah,
that we're in, and just
hmm
really surprised that we've really kind of we've gotten to this point.
yeah.
And again, the whole concept of after Ukraine comes this nation state, right? That mean the Russians then move into to Western Europe or what was Eastern Europe in terms of Poland. It's just
Well,
nonsensical.
it is nonsensical. I mean, it is bogus. Just it's just ridiculous. There's nothing in their history to show that. I mean, they never went after any other. Not in fact, not only did they not go after any other countries after what they captured when you're at the end, in the last stages of World War II, but they gave some back. I mean, they allowed Finland's independence, but they also allowed Austria its independence. Of Austria, they had occupied Austria, but they said, hey, if you want to be neutral, then you can be on your own there. And they withdrew from Austria.
Yeah, no. If those old generals that it existed then, if they could look into the future and see what was happening now, I don't believe the Berlin Wall would have come down. I don't think we would
Yeah.
have seen Glasnost. We would None of that would have occurred.
Oh
Would
yeah.
have happened.
I would love to show.
If
Yeah, yeah. I would love to show Gorbachev how this thing would play out. I don't want to go there.
Oh yeah, they would have removed Gorbachev,
Yeah.
yeah, it would have just been a continuation of kind of where we were, where we left off,
Mm,
pre 1990, pre 1989.
yeah. Hmm.
Yeah, yeah, and yeah, I mean, even in the I talked about during COVID,
Hmm.
having the opportunity to watch what was being taught. For instance, one of my children was in university up
Hmm.
in doing taking online classes,
Hmm.
and I mean, what's being taught is insanity.
Well, it is.
It's nuts.
Hmm.
I, I don't even know how they're getting away with teaching what they're teaching right now. I haven't got a clue.
Well, it's had plenty of time. They started the rot started when they were introducing postmodernist theory into universities back in the 80s, into the 90s, and it just took a life unto itself. Now it's all over the place, and you get the most ridiculous stuff coming out of it, and and it is basically is a classic sign that even if we don't have a nuclear war, the West is in decline. I mean, the Chinese and the Russians and everybody else is based on meritocracies and actual science. I mean, I hear things. Oh, there's people saying that ooh, math is racist, huh? Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, the ignorance of apogee when a civilization reaches such a pinnacle
Yeah,
that the new generation that grows up in apogee
yeah,
and then attends these so-called places of learning, which are now just places of
yep,
indoctrination, they everything changes. Your whole society changes,
yep.
and I'm seeing that now. I
Hmm.
mean, I know that this generation that exists now, these 18, 19-year olds don't even understand what I'm talking about,
Yep.
and and they're not the only ones on this planet,
Hmm.
and unfortunately for them, that this period in apogee is going to end.
Hmm.
And what that looks like post apogee, difficult to say. But I mean, the Visigoths are out there,
Yeah.
and yeah, I mean,
Oh, absolutely. And there it is. You know, and it's sad but true. I see that, and I fear for my grandchildren, and I feel sorry for them, the kind of world they're growing up in. But there it is.
yeah, Yeah, me as well.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So, is there anything else you would like to say before we wrap it up?
No, I think we pretty much covered everything. I wish the best for your channel.
Hmm.
Keep plugging along. Look, if a 7 year old child that has the ability to review toys can get millions of subscribers, I
Yeah.
would like to think that that real information at some point would would have a desirable impact on the populace.
Yeah. Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, I agree on that one. And I wish the best for your channel too, and we'll continue to watch it and promote it, you know.
Yeah, and again the biggest issue for me is just the historical record.
Yeah.
If any of this exists on some mainframe someplace
Yeah.
post wherever we're heading,
Yeah.
and they dig us out of the ashes,
Yeah.
maybe they'll find it and listen to this recording at some point.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. Yeah, that's why I sort of named my channel the Cassandra Project, you know, from that Greek legend, you know, where she had the gift of being able to see the future perfectly, but the curse of no one ever believing her.
Right, right. Well, look, it was a pleasure speaking with
Yeah.
you, and reach out anytime
Okay.
if you wanna have a conversation again. More than
Yeah,
happy.
love to. And feelings likewise. You know,
All right.
have a great week.
Yep.
Yeah. Bye bye.
You as well. Bye.